Okay, what we're going to do is fly through the next couple of layers in the client, and then we're going to try and hit the actual device. The first library on the client that we created, the first PCL, was the data object. So now we've got something on the client that represents the exact same data objects that we've got on the server. The next layer up in our sort of technology stack on the client is going to be the connection. And this is how the client is going to talk back to the remote server and get it data and execute logic. I'm going to keep talking about a client. I'm not talking about an Android phone or an iOS phone or even any sort of physical device or virtual device. I'm talking about a client. And like I explained the other day during the Physio My Way technology stack, up until a point, this is all common code. This code would work on Windows, would work on Android, would work on iOS. It doesn't matter. WPF, UWP. We're now in a we work anywhere. We're completely cross-platform still. We're not targeting a specific device. We're still a client. We're still out there, whether we're on a device, a desktop or whatever. We're still classed as a client, but we're not targeting something. The application design then is very, very simple. As I said right at the top, this is not a catalogue of my vinyls. I don't want to walk around the shop going, oh yeah, have I got that? Oh, don't those pictures look pretty? There's apps out there to do that. That's not what I'm after. I want a simple point and click, have I got that album? If I have, I'll not buy it. If I haven't, I fancy buying it. It's as simple as that. So the logic within the app is going to be quite simple. I'm going to query the catalogue and say, I want to do a select and see if it returns anything back. If it returns something, I've got the album. Great, tell me about it, but move on. If it doesn't, then I want to do a store procedure, because I'm going to execute my store procedure to query Google. And Google's then going to come back and say, yeah, I can find that. It costs so much if it comes back with the price. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Here's the description, here's the title, and here's a picture of it. If at that point I then click the I want to buy it button, I want to do an insert back to the database to say, you know what, I'm going to buy this. I may not have physically bought it, I may not have handed over my hard-earned cash, but I'll send back to the server to say, you know, I am buying this. Put it in my record collection. So that's the process. So on the client then, we can execute a simple select query. So select the information we want coming back, artist, title and image. I'm not interested in costs or barcodes or any other information that's stored in that record. Get it from the vinyl details table, but where the barcode that I've just entered on the phone is, which I've just read from the back of the album, and that's going to return a collection of results. So that collection is either going to contain 0 or n number of results. Chances are it's only going to contain 1 because the barcode is a primary key. Okay? So given that the primary key is unique, we should only get 1 back. You can get more than 1 if, for example, you've done a where of the artist has got the word king in it, like king. I got 3 back. Okay? So it's not a sort of one-to-one relationship, it's a one-to-many. They always come back as data objects and we can interrogate them. So we can interrogate this results collection, and if count is not equal to 0, then I have it. If I have it, then I have in this instance, an mCurrent vinyl data, which is just a private backing field, which is the type of vinyl details. I'll just move the data into that. By doing that, as we'll see when we get to the Xamarin Forms level, because our data objects raise the required property change notifications, the Xamarin Forms will be populated with the data that is contained within that object, that data object. As I was saying, the mCurrent vinyl is a data object and it follows the MVVM pattern, model view, view model. Xamarin Forms really does follow this, and so if you've sort of been thinking about WPF donkey's years and playing with MVVM and WPF, you're really in a really good position to take hold of Xamarin Forms on the device. And the Xamarin Forms, as well as working on Android and iOS, it's getting better and better. And the more Microsoft get on board, and obviously Microsoft own the Xamarin stuff now, the Xamarin Forms technology is going to be used for WPF and UWP as well. So it's becoming very much a, you write it once, obviously in Synergy using Symphony Framework, and you will deploy it to all and any platform. Okay? And they'll all look relatively similar. Not going to say they all look the same because they don't. And we showed that in the Physio My Way. with the shape view. On Android, you get the circles and you get the progress, but iOS you didn't. Now that could be a bug in their stuff, could be a bug in how I've implemented it, I don't know. Never got to the bottom of it. But buttons on Android look different to iOS. So even though it's a common visual code, a visual theme, they will honour the platform or the device-specific rendering of that. Okay, so you don't get big grey buttons like you do on Android on the iOS platform. Stored procedures. The commands are, as we said, fully awaitable, and you really need to be awaiting this stuff. You don't want your phone to just be blocking up while you're going to the server and trying to get something. You've got to await these commands. So basically await says, go off and do it, and when you've done it and you've come back to me, then I'll carry on processing this code. So, as well as doing selects and inserts, obviously we talked about the store procedure where you can execute those methods. That's logic that you've written and is awaitable and executable on the remote server. Methods accept native types. You can pass strings, integers, date times, etc., and or data objects. If you want to pass a whole data object to a method, you can do that. The response is always going to be either a data object or a collection, a list of data objects that you can iterate through. It'll never return a string, it'll never return anything else, it will always return a response of a list of data objects or a data object. The code that we've seen in what we've written so far has to be attributed. I mentioned this earlier, it's a security feature. If you don't attribute the code, then you will not be able to call it through Symphony Bridge and Symphony Harmony. Okay? It will throw an exception on the client, not callable, or I can't remember exactly what the error is, but as I say, it's a security feature. So in this one, we've got a very simple method, find vinyl online. It returns a single instance of a data object. That could do an @list of data objects. And it receives a native type of string called barcode. There's no limit to the number of, well, there is a limit. 255 is your limit of parameters, but you won't want 255. You can have any sort of real number of arguments or parameters. They do have to be .NET types. You can't pass a synergy alpha or a synergy decimal or an implied decimal. They have to be native types, int strings, etc. And you can put whatever logic in there that you like. And that logic can then go off and excall your old procedural routines. They have to be compiled in Synergy.NET and put in DLLs. You can't call intra-traditional Synergy in this environment. You can call intra-traditional Synergy through XF Server Plus if you so wanted to. But essentially you can do anything you like in here. And as I said a few minutes ago, you're protected in this app domain. So if you've got commons and globals and crazy weird things like that, it's not an issue. It's all protected and you'll be sort of isolated quite nicely. We saw the command inside the SDBMS manager. It's the exec command. If you've used relational databases, you must have been using store procedures. It's the same syntax, exec at the store procedure name. Well, our store procedure name is the name of the namespace, which is also, as we found out, the name of the DLL that all this exists in. So they've got to be the same. The class, and then the dot method. So you're identifying using a string, a name, exactly the method in the class, in the namespace that you want. And what Symphony Bridge does, essentially, is locate the DLL given the name of the namespace, creates an instance of the class, because you've given us the class name, and then calls into the method, because you've given us the method name. And it uses reflections to do that. It's the same as OpenELB and xcall xsubar. It's just a cleverer way of doing it. But it's essentially the same sort of thing that you would do in traditional. Okay? And as I say, it uses reflections to do it. On our connection then, we're going to use our search method to query the Google and return any vinyl details if we haven't got it in our database. So instead of us saying, yo, right, I've not got it, and then you type in, yeah, well, the title is, and all that kind of stuff. It's going to go to Google, get the information, and return that to the phone, and you'll be able to see it on the phone, and hopefully life will be good. So that's the actual code that we're going to implement. We're going to await the data execute, run data execute. Pass in the connector. We'll talk about the connector. That's just a connect string, essentially. And then we're going to do an exec on vinyl data, server methods, find vinyl online. The next argument to all of these is going to be the instance of the data object. You need on the client to tell the server what's the format of the data coming back. Okay, so you create a new instance of vinyl details data. Doesn't use that. There's nothing in there that it will use. It won't interrogate the properties in there. It won't use values in there, but it does a get type on the instance basically. And you pass in the barcode. And whatever arguments from barcode onwards, those are the arguments that will get passed through to when X calls the method.